What if I told you that not being the main character is actually your goal, that is what life should be all about? For years I lived trying to become the main character. I wanted to fulfill my desires, I wanted to be recognized, I was scared that I would waste my life otherwise, but I didn't realize how it was destroying me from the inside, how much pressure it put on me to have to be the main character. However, when I finally let go of that goal, that's when I found true purpose, happiness and freedom. And in today's video, I'll explain why and how you can do this for yourself. Hi, I'm May, and today I'll analyze the art style of For All Time, or Love Brush Chronicles. It's a visual novel game where the main character is actually also the author of a story into which she travels. It shows her as the writer of the story while also being in the story herself, which connects really nicely to this theme of being the main character in your own life story. Who is the author of your story? What does it mean to be the main character? And why is it so freeing to not have to be the main character? Let's find out as we go through different elements in the artworks from the game. We start with the lines. Lines are colorful with varying line thickness. They have a smooth look and can be painted over in a few cases. This is especially the case for inner lines or objects in the illustrations, adding more emphasis to the more clearly outlined silhouettes and characters. The face lines are especially clear here, drawing attention to this area. The color of the lines adds to a more cohesive look because these colors are a darker version of the color surrounding them. In some cases the lines also transition into shading, especially for a character's hands or necks, for example. One thing that can be associated with being the main character would be to be the center of the world or the center of the story. In stories the focus is on the main character, but in real life we're all important. The world doesn't revolve around us, but all of us have the chance to make meaningful contributions as we live our lives. Next we move on to the bodies. In For All Time these are portrayed as elongated and slender. Muscle or anatomy indications are portrayed through soft shading most of the time. Varying hues add to a more lively look for the skin color. Proportion-wise, the lower body can be slightly longer than the upper body, adding an elegant look. The elegant look also applies to the hands, which can be shaded with definition, portraying knuckles for example. The necks are thin and long, adding a youthful look, while the long bodies give a more adult impression, with characters being 8 to 9 heads tall. We often try to rely on our own perspective to make decisions. We try to find our own sense of right or wrong, but that can lead to viewing your own viewpoint as the only true one. With main characters in stories, the story is often presented from their point of view. Similarly, as humans we have a subjective experience of the objective world. Two people may experience the same thing but have very different interpretations of it. Because of this, it's important to stay open to other perspectives. Similarly to a body needing different parts to function, our own viewpoints and abilities often come from learning from different people with different perspectives. We're all needed, and it's good for us to have our own perspective. We can use empathy to try and understand others, and often we grow a lot from this. The faces have a soft, rounded, slim and long shape. The chin is rounded and the lower half of the face tends to have this triangular but soft look. The change of direction is usually rounded as well. It appears around the outer eye corner horizontally and between the nose and mouth area vertically. In the side profile it appears lower and between the ear and eyes. In other face angles the chin generally has a slight tilt forward. Let's move on to the facial features, starting with the nose. It has a triangular shape, often outlined with a nose bridge and lower nose part line. A nostril and some shading and or lighting around the nose can be added as well. A light behind the nose bridge line is especially common. When looking at the side view there's an upward turned triangular nose shape that's slightly rounded along the nose bridge with a sharp pointy nose tip. Let's stay at the side view to also start with the next feature, the mouth. Here we can see that the upper lip is more protruding than the lower lip, and that face shape-wise the nose area is most forward, with the mouth and chin as well as the forehead area being more inward. When we look at the mouth in other face angles as well, we can see that it's made up of a thin line with varying line thickness. There also is slight shading around the lips, even a highlight can be added. The characters often have rather calm expressions, with gentle smiles where you may just see some white from the teeth with slightly open mouths. When it comes to open mouths, inner parts, such as teeth, tend to not be outlined, they can be slightly shaded. The mouths tend to be delicate and small generally. It is similar with the next feature, the eyebrows. They are rather thin and long, but can also have a slightly pointy or edgy shape, adding a bit of sharpness and definition. Often they have a slight curve. This can give the characters a gentle expression. but the eyebrows are often placed further down on the face, which adds some determination to the expressions as well. Additionally, the eyebrows tend to be thicker on the inner side while thinning out towards both ends. As a last aspect here, I'd mention that when hair is covering facial features like the eyebrows and eyes, these are still slightly visible beneath. Before we moved on to the faces, I talked about the importance of being open to new perspectives. That doesn't mean that you should just accept or tolerate everything. Maybe you've also experienced a story where the main character was bland. In many cases, main characters are designed to be relatable so that the viewer can easily empathize with them. However, when we want to be more relatable, by accepting every viewpoint we come across, it can lead to instability, vagueness, and blandness. You come across many different opinions, especially if you use the internet on a day-to-day basis. While being open to hearing what others think is important, it's equally important to question what you hear, to not automatically accept everything or assume it's true. Your perspective is not the only true one, but the perspective of other people, organizations, and so on as well. You're probably aware of your imperfections, that you make mistakes sometimes, and that's the case for everyone else as well. Seeking to find truth and have a better perspective is good, but we should test what we come across. After all, we as humans can only perceive others' thoughts through what they say or what we see. We can only access our own thoughts in a deeper way, but to experience the world we rely on our senses, and often when you want to convey your thoughts to the outer world, things can get lost in translation. As an artist, I especially experienced this with drawing artworks as well. Trying to get an idea into a visual form, something that's perceivable by the eyes, can be challenging. Speaking of the eyes, let's move on to these next. Shape-wise, they appear parallelogram-like with rounded edges. When we look at the lashes, we have one thick upper one and a thinner lower one fully outlining the eye with a gap at the inner lower side or corner. What I found interesting here is that the inner upper lash can appear thicker than the outer upper lash part. What I have seen for many other art styles is that the line gets thicker toward the outer side, but here this is not necessarily the case. The slightly thinner outer line may also add some gentleness because the eyes appear like they are a bit downturned this way. And other than these main lashes, small lashes are commonly added at the lower outer eyelash. On the upper eyelash, small skin-colored lash shapes are often added too. This gives the eyes some detail. Then there's an additional small upper line at the upper inner eyelash line. Let's look at what's inside the eye shape, the iris, next. It is usually rounded, shifting a bit depending on the perspective or the face angle. Shading wise, we have a base color and then a shadow color which is added in the upper area. After this, I'd add a light color at the lower part of the eye and an optional small detail layer. Then the pupil and iris outline will have the darkest color. Speaking of the pupil, this has a round, slightly oval shape. Sometimes it can appear more edgy as well. When it comes to the white of the eye, here a shadow beneath the upper eyelash is usually added. And for highlights, there are usually two. One bigger one overlaps from the white of the eye to the iris at around the middle area of the eye. This highlight has a wide oval-like shape, which can be slightly sharp. Then a smaller dot-shaped highlight would also be added. This is a bit higher up on the other side of the eye as the first highlight and more central in the iris shape, overlapping with the pupil. Something that also adds detail to the eyes here would be shading of the eyelashes. The eyelashes have a dark brown underlying color, but light and reddish reflections can also be added. Often some of the light on the eyelashes will also reflect the iris color. As for the shading around the eye, this usually is connected to the eye lines, the lines around the eyes. Let's first talk about these. Direction, angle or shape-wise, the general eyelash shape is often similar to the eye lines directly above the eye. Here 1 to 2 long thin lines above the upper eyelash can be added. This line tends to follow the eye shape, but it can also have a bigger or angular curve at the inner side of the eye. When there are 2 lines added, the upper line is often thinner. It can have a slightly different shape than the lower one. The length of these lines is something that stands out to me, as I've often seen them being shorter in other styles before. Here the upper eye lines can have a length up to the whole eye shape. Here one shadow at the upper inner eye line can be added. Sometimes this varies, there just tends to be some form of shading above the eye. Below the eye on the outer side, a blush-colored outline shading around the eye shape can also be added. All in all, the detailed shading of the eyes and the face area around them tends to give the eyes a pretty and elegant look. The main character in stories is often affected by what happens around them. They react to their world, we also do, but many times for the main character they seem to depend a lot on the world. The world can seem to tell them what to do, An evil force seems to take over and the main character reacts by fighting that evil force. The world the main character is placed in needs someone who can rescue the princess, someone who can fight the evil wizard, or someone who can unfreeze the kingdom, for example, and the main character becomes that person. While it is noble to respond to the world's needs in such a way, our lives are often less clearly threatened. Evil forces don't just suddenly appear usually. Sometimes it can be difficult to identify whether something truly is a problem, whether we should take action about something. Because of that, we shouldn't be so dependent on the world to tell us what to do. Does the world determine who you're becoming? No. While it affects your decisions, at the end of the day you do. Standing up for what's right and overcoming everyday problems begins with a first step. While the world may not always clearly call for you to take action, you can do it. It's important to be aware of your own reaction to the world. The world may define some aspects of your life, but you don't have to depend on it for everything, especially because the world can be unstable and overwhelming. That's why placing your foundation in something greater than the world itself is freeing. Detachment from the world is something main characters rarely embody, mostly because they live in a fictional world with limits. But our world isn't limited to our time here. Why do you think we have the ability and need to do something that exceeds our own lives here? Why do we want meaning behind what we do? It points to seeking and finding something that transcends this world and your life. Now for the hair. This tends to be portrayed with many strands. Lines focus on the silhouette but are used throughout the hair for inner parts as well. The lines often transition into shading and some lines can be painted over. The lines are colored as well, making the transitions into the hair color more subtle or natural. The slightly rough approach to the hair gives it a bit of a messy but also playful and dynamic look. While the facial features have clearer outlines, the ambiguity for the hairlines adds a nice contrast. The hair is also detailed, with small hair strands being depicted and small flyaway hairs. Hairs that are not outlined are added in many cases. The hairstyles are made up of bigger general shapes, bangs in front, the hair part or the silhouette. These shapes are then filled with smaller strands, adding definition and detail. That's an approach I generally use to draw hair similar to this, starting with the bigger shapes and adding detail. This approach works both for sketching lines and also shading or rendering. Speaking of which, let's talk about the shading now. This varies a bit depending on the illustration and lighting or colors used. Sometimes hue variation can be added, often a bright light is included. Here are shading layers I would use for a shading result similar to these artworks. First is a base layer, next a shadow layer. Because this artwork has lighting from the back, most of the shadows appear at the front of the head here. Next is a first light layer for parts at the top of the head, as well as the highlights. Interestingly, these are not the brightest parts of the hair. The brightest parts of the hair would be on the second light layer at the outer silhouette. Finally, I'd add a layer for hue variation, with some reddish parts and a few bluish ones as well. The varying values and hues add some depth to the hair, and the shading includes a mix of rough, blended edges with sharper ones. A majority of the hair shading has sharper, triangular shapes. The highlights are placed around the forehead of the character. They can have small zigzaggy shapes or include many lines. Generally, these have a sharp look to them as well and can transition into the main light on the hair. The relationship between the main character and the world they're placed in is often strong. It seems like the character has impact because they do something significant in their world. Similarly, we may sometimes feel pressure to do something significant to gain value, but our actions don't change our value. For the main character, it may seem like they are the main character because of their actions. Their actions often make them appear more important. Their actions also tend to be clearly visible to the world, but for us, we're all valuable no matter our actions. Our actions don't change our role as humans. Like this, your contribution can be essential without always being directly visible. If you ever feel insignificant or that you need to be significant to the world to have a meaningful life, you can be assured that you're necessary and needed, that you were made for a reason. Even if you currently may not feel that important, your life has the power to lead to incredible changes in this world. It could start with something as simple as making someone else smile, by complimenting someone's outfit, for example. That leads me to the next aspect, the clothes. When it comes to the game For All Time, it generally takes place in a modern and more fantasy-inspired medieval world. Due to this, the main outfits of the characters are fitting to both these worlds. However, alternative outfits for special events can also be added, with aesthetics ranging from elegant, formal ones to more modern or futuristic ones as well. Most of the time, few colors are used, one main color per outfit. This gives the characters a refined and elegant look. Black and white are very common among all outfits, adding contrast and cohesion. Jewelry is very common. Silver and gold parts adorn the outfits in many cases, adding detail. Most outfits consist of these layers: shoes, pants, and some form of shirt as a base. Then a jacket or cape or another shirt can be added. Finally, we have the accessoires: jewelry, a bag, a scarf, belts, and so on. Patterns or buttons on the pieces of clothing add detail as well. Clothing is depicted with clear silhouette lines and less refined inner lines. The inner parts mostly use shading to depict folds. The focus on darker silhouette outlines with fewer, lighter colored inner lines adds visual hierarchy and order. One dangerous aspect about seeing yourself as the main character can be the following: perceiving other people as side characters, secondary, less meaningful. In stories, it may sometimes appear that way, but in real life, that is never the case. Even if you only see the world through your own perspective, it's the same for everyone else. Other people aren't there to serve your purpose or to support you only. We're all here to support each other and to serve our purpose, a purpose that transcends each one of us, a purpose that explains why we exist in the first place. Think about it. Why are we all here? You are not the cause of the universe which led to you existing in the first place. We can be grateful that we exist right now, but we shouldn't be blinded by our own existence. Living in the here and now, enjoying your own existence is a good thing, but reflecting on why you get to have this existence in the first place can lead to understanding beyond your limited and imperfect human perspective, a purpose that lasts beyond your existence. Let's talk more about the colors in the artworks and the game. Similarly to the outfits, these tend to have an elegant and cohesive look. Usually there are one or two main hues per illustration. Colors can be rather muted or one more vibrant tone. Red, yellow, or blue, for example, can be added. An interplay of cool and warm tones is sometimes used, with the skin and light being warm while the clothes and sky have cooler tones as an example. In some cases, there is this use of mostly black and white tones with just one color. Color scheme-wise, an analogous or complementary scheme can be used. Colors overall appear soft and muted, with glowing parts often adding an ethereal look. Cool and warm light can both be added, depending on the illustration, affecting the colors. Speaking of light, let's move on to the lighting and shading next. Before that, I talked about your existence blinding you in a way, only looking at the here and now and not reflecting on the bigger picture before we moved on to the colors. I also mentioned that we shouldn't see others as side characters who are there to simply serve us and support us. For some people this is easy to understand, but they can also make the mistake of feeling like their only purpose is to serve others and support them. Do you do things for recognition? In many cases, the main character is recognized by others for their actions, and we may think we need to get recognition by others to justify our actions. But similarly to making yourself the director of the world, wanting everything in it to act according to your will, it is equally wrong to make other people the director of the world and just follow their wishes. I mentioned before that you have inherent value. That means you don't have to do any actions for others for recognition. You're not the side character to someone else's story. Using these roles to define your life is limiting. Now let's talk about the lighting in the illustrations of For All Time. The character sprites are neutrally lit, with shadows added where folds are or parts overlap, for example beneath the neck, the hair, or capes. Here, slight light can be added around the chest area and at the outer edges of hair. When it comes to the more complex CG artworks, the lighting varies a lot more. Here, different lighting setups can be used with cool, neutral, or warm light and shadows, depending on the whole scene that is depicted. Light can come from above or from one side. In other cases, backlight can also be used with most of the character in shadow. Something that's common here is for the face to have parts in shadow as well. Often some light on the hair or face adds interest to this area. There is a gentle, dreamy look to the lighting setups, with the shadows not being too harsh or high in contrast, and some very bright ethereal looking light added at times. Let's go over some shading layers next, starting with the base layer and then a first shadow layer, next a second shadow layer for even darker shadows. After this would be a light layer and finally a hue variation layer. A lot of the shadows have clear and not blended edges, but because of the lower contrast it doesn't appear as harsh. The shadow shapes look smooth and gentle, but also refined. A lot of varying shadow shapes are added with different intensity and hues. But once again, since this is all done with not too much difference in values, it looks cohesive and elegant. More attention is drawn to the faces here, which have the least texture, to shading in many cases. The face apart from the eyes and nose look neutral in a way, adding an area of both rest and interest. Control is another aspect we may associate with main characters. They seem to be in control of the story, as the story revolves around them. But trying to take control of the story of the world in real life is impossible. You can affect it, yes, but you're not responsible for everything, and trying to control everything will only lead to stress and frustration. Once again, let's think about human imperfection. We can't know everything, so why should we try to control it all? If the world was being controlled by one human, it would also have the flaws of that human. Our world has flaws, which can be seen as a product of the many flaws different people have. Greed may lead people to be materialistic and focusing on their own profits, increasing the gap between the rich and poor, for example. Hate may lead to suffering or violence, and the need for power or authority may lead to wars and so on. The need of one person to be in control of everything tends to come with the belief that that person is always right, which can't be realized. That's why letting go of the need for control and focusing on the here and now, on controlling your own life instead of the world, is a much more wise decision that gives you serenity, peace and freedom. Having to control everything would be a bit like an artwork where everything seems to be important. It's overwhelming, there's no hierarchy or order, but when you focus on highlighting one aspect like the face through elements like lighting, for example, you have a nice contrast and clarity. Similarly to the lighting, what also helps with drawing attention to the faces is the aspect I'll talk about next, the extra effects and the backgrounds. Many of the illustrations feature detailed scenes with elements framing the character, and the character interacts with the space or props placed there as well. This makes the whole scene appear more believable and lively. The character's hands especially tend to hold objects that are relevant to the scene, such as a pillow, a book, a drink or a brush. Most of the time there's a background with less defined lines and contrast behind the character, as well as some foreground elements in front of the character conveying atmosphere and depth. The clearest lines are used for the characters' faces, then for their body, and the background or props get the least defined or harsh lines. Often they can be rough, colored and painted over. Here are some common places depicted in these illustrations: house interior, palaces or temples, as well as Asian-inspired buildings. And here are some common elements or props that are added: oceans or fountains, night skies, birds, ribbons, flowers and trees. Aesthetic-wise, I describe the scenes as natural, royal, elegant and airy, but this can heavily depend on the overall theme, whether that's more of a modern, futuristic, space, royal or medieval one. In many cases, some depth can also be added with blurred-out parts for the background, but especially for the foreground elements as well. This also leads me to the extra effects, for which I'll first mention the blurring of elements. I mentioned before that the contrast isn't very harsh most of the time, and due to this, the blurring really helps to separate foreground elements from parts in the middle ground, for example. Very common extra effects are small particles which can also glow. These tend to be placed surrounding the character. The face tends to not have these particles, which adds focus to it. Sometimes sparkles and rainbow light reflections can be added. The floating effects and elements can add a sense of dynamicness, weightlessness, and a dreamy, ethereal look. If you can't control the world, does that mean you don't have responsibility? No, as indicated before we moved on to the extra effects, you still have control over your own choices that affect your day-to-day life. You have free will and you can choose to use it wisely. While your choices may not affect the whole world like for a main character, they are still important. That's why learning how to make better decisions in life is a rewarding, helpful process. And that's also something we'll talk more about as we move on to the next part of this art style study, which would be drawing my OC Yumari, who I've also drawn for previous art style studies, in an illustration artwork inspired by the cards in For All Time. What does it mean to be a human being with free will inside a world you didn't create? If we're not the author of reality, how should we live inside the story we've been given? To answer these questions and to learn how we can make better decisions in life, let's go over 6 questions to ask yourself. One line in the game that stands out to me is, you can only paint the world you believe in. At first it sounds like it's only about art, but when thinking about it, it also applies to life itself. Every future we create starts long before our own actions. It starts with what we believe. If you believe people can never change, you'll stop giving them second chances. If you believe failure defines you, you'll stop trying new things. If you believe kindness is weakness, you may become someone who avoids vulnerability. Our beliefs shape our decisions. That's why one of the most important questions you can ask isn't just what am I doing, but rather what belief is producing the way I live. Changing our life doesn't just mean changing our habits. It starts with changing the story we've been telling ourselves all along, with changing our beliefs. None of us chose where our story began. We didn't choose our family, our country, our personality, or many of the difficulties we would eventually face. In a way, life gives each of us a different first chapter, but from there it changes. We begin making choices. Every decision is an act of trust. For example, when you start working out, you trust that today's effort will matter months from now. When you forgive another person, you trust that bitterness doesn't have to define your future. Whenever you choose one path instead of another, you're placing confidence in something you believe is worth following. Growing up isn't about gaining complete control over life. It's about learning that although you don't control every circumstance, you can decide what kind of future you move towards. At one point, the protagonist in For All Time says, or rather thinks, the following line: "I'm not an omnipotent author that can write the perfect ending." To me, this is one of the most freeing realizations a person can have. We often live like we should already know exactly what career to pursue, which decisions are correct, or how our future will unfold. But we're not standing outside of the story, we don't define the rules within it. In a way, we get to write the story into the book each day through our own choices. But we're not the ones who created the book we get to write into. Instead, we're living inside of the story without an omniscient point of view of everything. Because of this, instead of trying to control every outcome, it makes sense to pay attention to something we actually can influence: ourselves. Identity isn't something we discover once and keep forever. It's something that gradually changes as our understanding of life changes. Every challenge we face makes us ask what will happen, and a good response to the challenges you're facing is asking yourself, who will I become because of this? Another idea the game explores is the difference between the person writing the story and the person living inside it. An author sees every chapter, a character only experiences one page at a time. Real life is much closer to the second. Everything we know has reached us through someone else: our parents, teachers, friends, books, communities, or the stories we consume, for example. No one builds their understanding of the world completely alone. Other people also only have their own experience, their own story, but each of our own stories is connected to the stories of other people in this whole big story of human life. As with the example image I showed at the start of the section, we can use our lives to show gratitude to those who gave us life, experience, and happiness. At the same time, we should be mindful when it comes to the things we are taught by others. Just like us, they are not omniscient and only have their own point of view. That's why it's good to not just ask yourself, what do I believe, but also, who taught me to believe it? The people and ideas you surround yourself with become part of how you see reality. Every conversation, every book, and every story you experience is shaping the person you're becoming. While you may not get to choose the family you're born into, you have the power to choose some of the things you let yourself be shaped by, like the stories you consume, for example. In the game, the main character has the power to affect the world in such a way, choosing a future. In our day-to-day life, we also base our decisions on a future we choose. We may not always be able to realize that future, but we can aim for it. In fact, it gives us direction. Many people think freedom means having as many options as possible, but unlimited options don't automatically create meaning. Imagine standing at a train station where every train is available, but none has a destination you actually care about. The problem isn't a lack of freedom, it's a lack of direction. When you're presented with a bunch of options, with several possible futures, when choosing hobbies, classes, a job, or how you spend your time, it can be overwhelming. When you then shift the question from what can I do, or what are all the possible options, to what kind of future do I want to build, you can make better choices. Without that question, our choices may become reactions to whatever feels good in the moment. With it, even smaller daily decisions can point towards something bigger. Throughout the game, better futures aren't free. Every hopeful ending asks someone to give up comfort, certainty, or something valuable. That's true outside of the game as well. Becoming wiser costs pride, strong relationships cost time, creating beautiful things cost effort. Telling the truth sometimes means sacrificing popularity. We often dream about the life we want without asking what we are willing to give up for it. However, sacrifice is usually the price that makes purpose real. Every meaningful choice closes off other possibilities. That's why choosing one future also means letting another future go, and sacrificing that other future makes our choices valuable. We aren't responsible for writing the entire story of the world, but we are responsible for our own pages we write through our decisions, and over time, those pages become the person we leave behind. That's it for the 6 questions and the process of drawing Yumari. I enjoy how games like For All Time allow us to experience and explore other possible worlds and stories. It's amazing how we can come up with worlds, characters, and stories on our own while also living out our own stories as people in a world we didn't come up with ourselves. In For All Time, the protagonist spends much of the story searching for answers about the world she has entered. She wants to understand where she is, why things happen, and how the story should end. In a way, we spend much of our own lives asking the same questions. We want certainty, we want complete understanding, we want to know whether we're making the right decisions, but maybe being human was never about becoming the author of reality. We don't choose where our story begins, we don't know every chapter that comes next, we can't rewrite the pages behind us. However, every day we're still given a blank page, not so that we can control the whole story of the world, but so that we can decide who we become within it. Our mission isn't just whatever the world places before us, it's what we choose to do with what has been placed before us. I hope the questions I mentioned are helpful to you. Maybe you'd like to share some of your own reflections about all of this as well. As a final small bonus, here are a few more ideas related to the game. The protagonist literally paints worlds into existence. That's a powerful metaphor for how our repeated thoughts, decisions, and habits gradually paint the world we inhabit through our minds, because our minds shape how we perceive reality. Stories often become compelling because the protagonist isn't fully in control. Obstacles, uncertainty, and dependence on others lead to growth. Likewise, a life where everything goes according to our plan may not actually produce wisdom. One of the main shifts this video focused on is about identity. When you want to be like a main character, you may build your identity around self-authorship. However, an identity built around participating in a larger story leads to purpose and freedom. That doesn't mean you should just imitate the beliefs and values of those around you, but you should not feel the need to have full control over others or reality. In For All Time, the protagonist's ability to travel across worlds and gradually understand them mirrors an important human experience. Wisdom often comes from seeing beyond your own perspective. The more worlds you metaphorically visit, through stories, conversations, history, and faith for example, the less likely you are to believe your viewpoint is the only one. Instead of asking yourself, am I the main character? A much more meaningful question would be to ask yourself, whose story am I living in? It's about finding out who made the book for you to write your own story into in the first place. This shifts the perspective from importance to purpose. I enjoyed exploring the art style of For All Time, as it is a game I have been familiar with for around 5 years now. It's inspiring to me. If you'd like to support me in some way, feel free to check out my Patreon, where you can find screen-recorded process videos of my art. Other than this, leaving a like and possibly subscribing for more videos like these in the future would mean a lot. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, bye.